Hello, welcome back to Ham Radio. I'm Robert, Kilo Juliet 7, Quebec Mike Papa. Going to talk a little bit today about what is ham radio. I got a lot of questions from my first videos on what is ham radio and kind of what am I doing. Turns out a lot of my subscribers are family and friends and people that don't really know about ham radio, so this one's for you guys. Alright, so what is ham radio? At its very basics, ham radio is a two-way licensed amateur radio service. There are different entities to it all around the world. Here in the United States, it's licensed through the FCC, and we have 18 bands. A band is just a set of frequencies or a range of frequencies in which we are authorized to operate under our license. You got things like your VHF, UHF bands, which are more your local communications. You can use anything from like these hand talkies, putting on about 5 watts for pretty limited range communications. I mean, there's a lot of variance in it. Like, you know, if you're in a flat, plains land, you'll be able to talk a lot further than I am going to be here in the mountains. But for the most part, it's local communications. There are things like repeater systems. We have a linked repeater system here in Utah that covers most of the state, can even reach into Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. So, I mean, it's really cool for that, but most of what I use it for is local communications, even local repeaters that just cover the local area. We have a repeater here that we do a net on, and a net is just a group of ham radio operators that meet on a certain repeater frequency at a scheduled time intervals. We do it once a week here and discuss things. Usually clubs and stuff do that. We do our club when we reach Summit, Morgan, and Wasatch counties here in Utah, all on this through a repeater system. But it's also great for local communications in groups such as hiking, off-roading, some other things like that, where you have more than one licensed person with the equipment to communicate. Then you got things like this, which is your HF setup. You can talk around the world on this. I've just with the radio, no linked in between, just radio to radio. I've talked to Sweden, Denmark, Spain, so you can really get out on something like this. This is more your worldwide communications. And I mean, you can get different radios in both. You can get what's called a QRP radio that's only putting out 5 watts, which you can still talk around the world on. It's amazing. And then things like this, you can get like car setups for your vehicle or your home that puts out up to 50 watts. So you can get a little bit further with that. So those are always options. But this is my field setup, which is kind of what I'm trying to focus on in my YouTube, is what I do in the field. So what are some of the difference between ham radio and some of the other amateur radio services offered in the US? There's CB, which is your citizen band radio. There's FRS, which is like your blister pack radios, the radios you go to Walmart and get. They're very limited in wattage. You're not allowed to alter them in any way. So you can't take the antenna off and put a better antenna on. They have really short antennas, usually not a lot of range on them. Then there is MERS, which is similar to FRS, multi-use radio service, and it only has like 5 channels in the VHF range, whereas your FRS, which is your family radio service, is in the UHF range, which just means the speed of how fast or how long the radio wave goes over distance to how long it takes to make a full wave sign. Those are faster moving waves, more local communications, both of them. And then your GMRS, which actually shares 21 channels with the FRS service. You get a little bit more power and a little bit more freedom to do things with your radio, such as put a better antenna on it, and get just a little, eke a little bit of extra range and clarity out of your signal. I'm also a GMRS operator. I think it's a great service. I think it has a huge advantage of being able to share those frequencies with the FRS service that's a non-licensed service. The biggest difference between ham radio and FRS, they're both licensed services, or excuse me, GMRS and ham radio are both licensed service. FRS is not a licensed service. But for your amateur radio or ham radio, you have to go in, take a test, and then it's $35 application fee to the FCC, which is fairly new this year. So if you're watching around this time, you may have heard that it was free before. It is now $35 to upgrade vanity call sign, upgrade your license, or get a new license. So just be aware of that. With the GMRS service, you still have to pay the $35 fee, but there's no test involved. You just go on the FCC website, put in your information, pay your fee, and wait until they issue your call sign, and you're set up, get the radio and go. So sometimes that can be a little bit better option for some people that don't want to fuss with the test and learning about radios. They just want something they can communicate in small groups with. It's great for things like overlanding, backpacking, things like that. It does give you access to a repeater system, GMRS does. However, it's pretty limited on how many repeaters are out there. There are tons of ham radio repeaters out there, but there's very limited number of GMRS radios available. So then there's CB. Go back to that a little bit. CB is in the HF realm, but it's limited to 4 watts. So it really does limit your ability to get out. Now you can talk around the world given the right atmospheric and band conditions. And by that I mean radio propagation is greatly affected by the sun and the radiation from the sun, as well as a number of other factors. There's so many things that affects propagations, and under perfect conditions with a CB radio you can talk around the world. It is possible, but for the most part it's pretty limited in range. It's more local communications because of the limited power wattage output, which is kind of the disadvantage of that. You're limited to 4 watts. And then MRS, I'm not going to talk too much about MRS. There's 5 channels in the VHF realm, and I've never used them. I don't know anything really about them. It's not licensed, but it just seems to me that it's not worth going out and spending the money on a radio that you only get 5 channels out of. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about it. I mean, I'm sure there's great uses for it, for same thing, hiking, your local communications type stuff. So there's an option there. If it was me, I'd go with the GMRS. Still local communications. You get the advantage of being able to talk to people that don't have a license through the FRS service. So that's a fantastic service. I'd encourage anybody that's interested to look into it. So what can we do with ham radio? Well, there's a ton of things you can do with ham radio. There are 3 basic modes of operation. There's voice, which is your just basic, you're talking into the mic, somebody's hearing your voice on the other side, they're responding to you, you're hearing their voice. There's CW, or Morse code, which is, you know, like your old time telegraph, the beeps, dits and dahs, which is very cool because it takes up very little band space to be able to send out a CW signal. You can get a long ways on a very limited amount of power. I'm not quite there yet. I'm still learning CW. Hopefully here soon you'll be seeing it in some of my videos. But for now, I'm mostly stuck to voice because it's probably the easiest to get into. It's the least learning curve. Like I said, I'm working on CW, and then eventually I want to start getting into the next category, which is digital modes. Digital modes, there's a ton of them out there. There's FT8, there's PSK31, there's Packet. Not really going to touch too much on those because I have not personally experienced them. I think, to me, most of them seem to have limited actual communication abilities, and I'm not saying that that's 100% true, as I have not looked into them too much. The one that I'm going to talk just a little bit about is called WindLink. That's something that I feel is a astronomically valuable tool in an emergency. So WindLink is a radio-based email system. You can do it through either service. I'm trying to get it set up through HF right now because I can send with my radio. And my computer linked together. I can get on, and if we're in an emergency and for some reason, you know, internet's down, power's down, cell phone communication's down, I can get on there and send an email through my radio out to somebody who's not in the amateur radio service, and they can send emails back to me. And I think that could be super valuable because if you're in an emergency, you have somebody that's outside the disaster zone, say you're in a hurricane or a tornado or something, and you survive, you can, you know, put your equipment together, send out a signal, let, you know, people who are not in the affected area, that, you know, loved ones and stuff, you can let them know you're okay. I think that is phenomenal. It's also great to get, you know, messages in and out. Now it is a slow connection, so you should probably try to limit size of message as much as you can on that. But I think it's a valuable tool, so I just wanted to touch on that just a little bit. Now, some of the activities you can do, I mean, there's a ton of different ways to operate ham radio. There's people who do it solely from their home shack, and they have enormous sized transceivers that put out a lot of power, and they, you know, hook up amplifiers to them to amplify their signal even more. And they have tuners for their antennas, which you can do tuners portable too. You can really get a lot of power out that way, and you can obviously have much larger antennas because you don't have to pack them around, which gives you an advantage. There are people who do solely QRP stuff, low power, less than 10 watts, portable, but there's a ton of different things out there. Me personally, my favorite thing to do is field, portable stuff, things that I can take out here, and I'll set up my rig and I can talk to people around the world. I do a lot of SOTA, which is summits on the air. You go to a designated peak, which you can find through the SOTA website or app, and then you hike to the peak. You have to be within, I think it's 80 vertical feet of the peak, so fairly close to the peak. And there's different ways to find the activation zone. I use an app called SOTA Go, but there's tons of different ways. You can just look it up online and find out where the activation zone is that way and use a map. But anyway, you get to the peak, you got to make 4 contacts with the radio to activate the peak. And then I also do a similar thing called POTA, or Parks on the Air, where here in the U.S. it's national and local, national and state parks. are on the list, and then national forests, things like that, are all on the list. And it's kind of the same thing. You go out with your radio. You can use either one. It don't matter. You can get contacts as long as it's in the amateur radio bands. But with that, you got to get 10 contacts. But you can just drive up and do it. That's kind of what I've done more because, well, it's easier. So, I mean, getting 10 contacts isn't that hard to do, in my opinion. I have failed at it a couple times. I failed at getting 4 for POTA once. There's just different things that can affect it. Band conditions are largely affected by the solar cycle, which is an 11-year cycle. I'm not going to go too much into that because I want to keep it brief and something for more basics, but there's many different things that can affect your signal, so there are days that it's not easy, but for the most part I found that I can usually get at least 10 contacts. So why choose ham radio? For me, it's the best bang for your buck as far as the radio services. As I said, I do have a GMRS license as well, but there's a lot of community involved. There's areas and races, which are emergency services that assist with government functions. So like I'm part of the Aries group here in Summit County, and we have some stuff set up with search and rescue and some different things like that. I haven't done a whole lot with that yet. I hope to do a lot more, but it's a good way to give back to your community and have a sense of community. And you could be valued in a disaster. I mean, even if you're not part of one of them groups and you have WinLink set up, you could set up a station somewhere where people could come and give you their family's email address. You could shoot a quick email out to them, let them, hey, no, this person's okay, they're alive, whatever. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity out there if you have a ham radio to give back to your community. Preparedness. There's many different levels of preparedness. Local events, hurricanes, after Katrina, ham radio was heavily used for communication in the area, as well as to outside the area. The bombings in Texas, was shortly after that I learned about WinLink and some people that were using it to get messages out to their family, which is cool. And then there's, end of the world, not saying it's gonna happen, but if all the services go away, your cell phone's not gonna work because you rely on it for another entity being your service provider to have that service up and running. With ham radio, the gear you see here is what I need to operate. I don't need a subscription. I don't need, I don't rely on another entity to provide me service. So I think that's pretty cool, like you will, as long as you have the gear and you can maintain it, you have communications around the world. And that's something, in my opinion, could be very, very valuable. Activities. Like I said, I do a lot of activities, and activations of parts. There's many different groups. There's a group of battleship destroyers that are, retired around the world that you can communicate with, and that's another thing that people do. But it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun to be had with it. For me, it's helped make me more active, getting out and hiking the peaks and stuff. Give me a little bit more motivation to do that. Help me, lose weight. It's something I battled with. So there's just a lot of things out there that it's really cool for, and I think it's, I don't want to say superior to the other services, but it's definitely, I think it gives you more options because you get your local communications, you get your long range communications, and there's, it's the best bang for your buck. Like I said, I think, GMRS is also super valuable for some other interesting things, and eventually I do hope to do a video kind of showing the different ranges and different availabilities, different capabilities of the different services, and use all of them and just kind of experiment, see which one works better in what conditions. But overall, I think ham radio probably gives you the most opportunity for communication. Now it is limited outside of an emergency situation. It's limited to talking to other people with ham radio license, which is kind of the one downfall. I wish there was something like with the GMRS and FRS service where we share some channels and we can operate talking to some people that are not, necessarily went and got the license. I think that could be a cool thing. But overall, I think it's a great service. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to, throw them out, comment down below, ask me. I'd be glad to answer them. And I'm always willing to, show more. Let me know what you guys want. Like, subscribe, share, and click the notifications so you can see when I upload new videos. And come back and see me next time. Thanks again, and have a great day.